Hi class, I hope you're all doing well on our snow day here. Hope you're all staying warm inside. I have my tea here, I'm staying pretty warm too. Hopefully you have a equivalent warm beverage. So today's lesson will be a fully online lesson, so you'll need to have a Google Doc or a Word document prepared for some of the work we're going to be doing later. And we are continuing with Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. Now I know that we've discussed really in depth about some the different devices that Christie uses, whether that's her time manipulation and the way she sequences events in the form of an interview, the way her narrator looks into each and every character, almost like a detective, paying attention to those details. And today we'll be investigating the plot device of a red herring. Now I know that sounds kind of funny. We're going to go into what a red herring is, literally and in literature as well, how Agatha Christie uses it. In this book in particular, we'll be identifying some of the areas, how you can identify a red herring, and then you will be doing some creative writing and coming up with your own scenarios and own stories to use a red herring in. So like I said, we'll go over all this in the future, but if you have any questions along the way while watching this video, while going through your online lesson, please feel free to email me. So let's start. Now, many of you, I'm sure, are wondering what a red herring is. Doesn't sound like anything we've read about in literature so far, does it? Well, in a literal sense, a red herring is a type of fish, a red fish, similar to like a sardine or something like that, a very small fish, but it's really brightly colored, really easy to spot, and it also really stings. And so in historical past, now we don't know if it's maybe just a myth, but it's something that's been spread from generation to generation, that hunters would actually use these red herring fish to distract their hound dogs, whether to get them away from the prey that they just shot, whether to maybe throw another hunter off their game. But it was used to distract and to deceive. And just in the same way, a red herring in literature does the same thing. A red herring in literature is any plot device that the author uses to distract the reader from what's actually happening. Now, as you can probably predict, this is really popular in the mystery genre because we want to keep up that suspense, keep up that tension, right? And we don't want to reveal everything to our reader. The author will use red herrings to add in maybe extraneous details or a new character or an event that really doesn't have anything to do with the plot or have anything to do with the truth, but we want to keep our reader guessing and keep them maybe on their toes. Agatha Christie uses red herrings pretty often, especially in this novel, in Murder on the Orient Express. So we're going to go through and identify just a few of those areas, and I'd like you to reflect your own kind of ideas and your own thoughts as you were reading the book, and if you maybe had any notion that this was a red herring as you read, or if you look back now and could kind of identify and see the details maybe that stand out to you at the moment. So one of the many occurrences of a red herring that happens in this novel happens on page 124. So if you could please turn there, it's at the bottom of the page. Shall we now see the Italian? Poirot did not reply for a moment. He was studying a grease spot on a Hungarian diplomatic passport. So, this is an example of a red herring in Agatha Christie's novel. It's a minor detail, something that maybe could be easily overlooked, but yet it reappears again and again as the detective goes over the evidence, as he interviews different people, and we later find out that what seems to be, maybe a minor mistake, maybe they were eating food when they used their passport or had something greasy on their finger, was actually something that was really important and distracted the reader and distracted the detective from the truth that they actually changed their name on the passport. This is just one of these examples of the way that Agatha Christie uses a really small detail, but through repetition and through really focused concentration on this detail, we later find out to be a red herring. Another red herring that has something directly to do with Ratchet and his death occurs on page 63, somewhat in the middle of the page. From the breast pocket he brought out a gold watch. The case was dented savagely, and the hands pointed to 1:15. "You see," cried Constantine eagerly, "this gives us the hour of the crime. It agrees with my calculations. Between midnight and 2 in the morning is what I said, and probably about 1 o'clock, though it is difficult to be exact in these matters. Eh bien, here is the confirmation. 1:15. That was the hour of the crime." So you see that Constantine actually takes this detail, this object, right away to be the fact that because it broke at this time, because the watch broke at this time, Ratchet had to have died, had to have been killed or passed away at this exact moment. But you see that it also distracts us from what really happened. There, the author makes no other possibility that maybe the clock was broken on purpose at this time to distract the detective and distract anyone who would be watching from what actually happened and when Ratchet actually died. Our last example of a red herring that actually occurs during Ratchet's murder, which we find out, of course, later in the novel, happens on page 38. Again, kind of towards the middle of the page. He sprang up, opened it, and looked out. Nothing. But to his right, some way down the corridor, a woman wrapped in a scarlet kimono was retreating from him. At the other end, sitting on his little seat, the conductor was entering up figures on large sheets of paper. Everything was deathly quiet. So this object of the woman in the scarlet kimono, and specifically the kimono, occurs and shows up again and again in this novel, to the certain point that Detective Poirot actually finds it in his suitcase, correct? So we see, once again, the way that an author can use even just a simple object like this scarlet kimono to represent a red herring, which ironically enough is that scarlet color as well. So we see that in this case, the scarlet kimono pulled away from the truth that there were multiple murderers, there were multiple suspects in this incident, and instead made the detective and others investigating the case focus on this one singular suspect, this one singular person that was later discovered to be moving away or running away from the scene of the crime. So now that we've reviewed several of the red herrings that Agatha Christie uses in this novel, feel free to go back and look for more. There are actually several more that are included throughout the book that I'm sure you can pinpoint now that we've discussed the idea of repetition and the way she focuses really closely on these particular details that distract the reader or even slow down time and make you really focus on an object or on a person that doesn't really exist or doesn't really have anything to do with the truth. So now that we've reviewed some of these, I'd like you to go back and kind of recall and rethink your own feelings and your own thoughts the first time that you read this novel and the first time that you read through these red herrings that we've now identified. Did you notice anything suspicious, anything fishy about these different details? Did you think that they were a part of the truth? Did you think they were facts that actually happened, that actually led the way to Ratchet's death and to identifying the suspects? Or did you realize that something was off, that maybe these were extraneous details that didn't really need to be included but were just there to distract you and set you off? So as you think about these, I'd like you also to think about how we use our senses to identify the truth. Of course, these are what we rely on to recognize the world around us. So by having these really particular, really unique objects, like the watch, like the grease spot on the Hungarian passport, and like this scarlet kimono, which of course is much like a red herring, this really bright, distracting color, I'd like you to actually pull up your Google Doc and do a Google search, and I want you to find one graphic that fits each of these red herrings that we've just discussed. Of course, we rely very heavily on visual evidence to tell us what something is, to tell us the truth about the world. So just like the detective relied on this physical evidence in the novel to find the truth and to find the actual suspect or suspects, I'd like you to find one image for each of these red herrings that would fit and that what you picture these red herrings to be. And please upload these to your Google Doc and we'll go over these in class, and I'd like to see just the different ideas and the different visuals that you guys have chosen to identify these red herrings.